All right. Max, what are we reviewing today? And anyone else watching this? Um, Today we got Dragon Hoops. I am basically trying to read, I guess, everything Jin Yang has ever written. Um, what's the story about? This is a cool story about Bishop O'Dowd. It's a Catholic high school in California, and it's a personal story where I've read a couple now of Gene's books. American Born Chinese, absolutely fantastic. Lunar New Year's love story is up there now with one of my favorite of all time. I think even better than American Born Chinese. Dragon Hoops, he's actually in this story. He draws himself as the author, going to his high school, talking about his family, talking about teaching and making comics, and not really getting sports. That's how this begins, and a lot of people I know obviously can relate. I am a sports guy, relatively speaking. I like, football in particular. Have grown to love basketball. Love watching the Sixers here in Philly. But for anyone that doesn't get sports and truly doesn't, like, why would I ever care about this or think this is interesting? This is such a good book to discover maybe like the superhero ness in sports. And I think, without again, I'll show my patent pending scoring system in a minute, but he basically walks through a case study of basketball as a sport, the individual players on the team and their connection to it, the meaning behind it, and kind of how it changes him as a person and opens him up to the beauty of this thing. Very, very cool book. So anyway, yes, we'll jump right into the patent pending scoring system. Let's start with the characters. I gave it a strong 8 score for a bunch of different reasons. Um, you know, Again, you get really cool inside the mind of the author stuff, thinking about like his love of like superheroes, and again, like the Superman versus Lex Luthor, talking about now being older, not really getting the magic with sports, and then his own self discovery of like why this is awesome. You have this reoccurring theme as well with a character with the main character being the author throughout this book, where you see here there's this pie chart. He has this interesting running thing through the whole story where he's kind of breaking his life into family, teaching, and comics. And you get the sense that at certain points he's like missing something. Like, oh, maybe I used up all my good ideas. Maybe the comic parts are gone. But then actually, when you get too good of an idea, you almost can let that part start to suck up other parts of your life which you like being balanced as they are. So that's like a pretty neat aspect of it. But then on the character side, every single one of the teammates that you get to interview is fantastic. You get a lot of like cool personal things too, where like one of the kids, it's sort of meta at points. Like one of the kids you learn a lot about is Punjabi, and he gets into a conversation about how his hairstyle doesn't look right when he sees, I guess, initial drawings. So you can see here on the one side, this guy's hair kind of changes shape a little bit, almost showing like a real time expression of, I guess, the back and forth conversations. Really cool deep dives into individual players, like some of the greats that like open the door up for girls playing the sport as well. So I think the mix of this author, again, who I'm biased and do quite like because I've read a bunch of stuff by him, his own personal journey as like the nerd that doesn't like sports, like really falling in love with basketball, getting a bit obsessed, is very cool as a character. The individual teammates on this team, the coach's coach, fascinating characters. I don't want to like spoil too much of the inner dynamics and the history here, but all really cool. And it's also really neat to like see, like, I think this just did a really cool job physically representing a sport in a comic book form. I already showed the X Factor score is high, but connected to learning about the characters, you obviously get a lot of pages about basketball. I didn't think it would look as cool as it is in the comic book form, a sport like this. So anyway, characters, strong score. I gave the art a strong 6. I guess I was just showing parts of what I thought were cool, in how they artistically depict things. Some of this are like famous moments in like you know, basketball history, like for instance, like, you know, the dream team in the Olympics, and seeing that for the first time internationally. There's a really cool chapter just on Yao Ming, which I was just on. But I think the art looks great. Is it my favorite art in the world? Would I remember the art exactly and come back to that and reread the book for the art? Like, no, probably not. But do I think it captures the action really, really well? Yeah, I do. I think it looks awesome. And I think it's probably less like aesthetically how the art looks and more, again, like the great layout of text and color. And anyway, I guess anyway, I'm rambling here, but really do like how it looked. Do I think it is as strong as the characters, the history, or the culture, the X factor? Probably not. We'll move on to the history and culture part then. I think a really interesting part of this book is yeah, I mean, it tells stories about India, about China. Most of it is about the United States, but it also tells a real deep history about a sport, which is, I think, really, really interesting. I haven't reviewed a book quite like this. Way back to like basketball's formation by a guy working at the YMCA, up to similar things when girls were pushing to make basketball a sport that they could play as well. You see here too, there's this big step that's like a reoccurring theme in this book, is sort of doing something new, doing something that takes a leap of faith, and that first step is the really pivotal one. That comes up again and again for all kinds of various reasons. A ton of sports history, how it really weaves in American culture, how that is like seeped internationally. If you've seen, there's a great Netflix documentary about the American impact of the NBA Dream Team, and then a lot of people seeing that internationally, and like basketball just igniting. Like the entire world has gotten, I think, onto a next level of basketball play because of some kids watching stuff that they thought wasn't possible, and, you know, superseding whatever expectations would have been there. So I think this book captures nicely that superhero dynamic of what sports can do. It can present somebody that looks almost superhuman, and then people can get excited wanting to replicate that, and that, you know, very beautiful. So a lot of really cool history around the sports. You get like religious history as well. Like one of the very early like superstars here would always he's an incredibly tall guy, would always do sign of the cross. He was the person that also got goaltending banned. He was so tall, he like was sort of breaking the game at the time. And then like almost translating that similar kind of thing to modern day players, new religions, just really beautiful, really interesting stuff. So a lot of intermix again of sports, countries, histories, religions intertwined. I couldn't say enough about the good stuff about this. You know, moments in professional sports history like Yao Ming being able to like stuff Shaq, which had never happened before. Like this guy like researched up, down, and, you know, sideways the history of basketball and just found such cool ways of linking it back to the individual players on this California team. So really strong history culture. Readability, I gave it a 5. Do I think it's readable? Absolutely. This is also just, it's a massive book. It's over 400 pages, and I mean, I've shown enough sample pages at this point, probably. Some of them read quick, especially the ones like during the basketball games, but some of them obviously are pretty dense and take a while. So this was not again, personal preference here. That's how I always rate these things. This book does an extremely good job, I think, balancing interesting, diverse characters, history, and a sport simultaneously. Does that mean I'm so invested in an incredibly small group of people that like emotionally you're tied to? Not so much, because every chapter is almost a new person that's like the focal point, like a new lens of looking at how basketball, people, culture intertwine. That's cool, but it almost makes it one of those experiences that you could chunk very nicely and not feel like you're like losing steam or like missing a cliffhanger, I guess, like what's going to happen next. So all that to say, I think again, some of these things they almost cannibalize themselves. The strengths of this book probably hurt its readability, and that's often the case. I think with making a work like this, it's hard to get tens across the board. So I think the strength it adds is an incredible amount of history that's relevant, related to the characters, related to everything. Does make it a little long, does make it a little wordy at points, does divide it up into chunks that feel, you know, like, oh, I'm satiated, I'll stop for tonight and read it later. But still, not bad. Everything strings you along. You still care about everyone, and the art makes it easy to want to keep reading. So it's kind of a balance there. I give it in the middle of the 5. And then X Factor, I gave it an 8. It doesn't completely like remake the medium, but I just had to give it such a high score because, I mean, I've read like 40 of these graphic novels, just reviewing, in the series, things that have different cultural graphic novel related things across the globe. I just had never seen a sport really be so front and center. I thought that was really, really cool. Just so creative in how I think they told that story through the basketball story. So overall, really strong 7 total. Tons of great things here. Or maybe I should say it to you this way. I feel like this book is a great example of how different people could maybe see something beautiful where they wouldn't normally. So for people that love comics that don't normally like sports, pick this up because you might really see the joy of basketball in a way that you never would have pictured it. And on the other side, I would say for people that love sports, if you've got a hardcore sport person that that thinks comics don't make a lot of sense, this is a perfect book to get a sport junkie into maybe seeing the awesomeness of graphic novels as well. Because it tells the story of basketball in such a cool way, but in a way that I think only a graphic novel could. So anyway, Dragon Hoops, big suggestion, really enjoyed it.